Hello, my friends. Hello, hello. I didn't record yesterday because I had a massively busy day dealing with some shipping problems. And so I didn't get to do any knitting until much later in the evening. And I bound off, down here. I bound off the hem last night, like right before I went to bed. So I really didn't have much to share with you yesterday because it was just more knit two, purl two, around and around and around. But today I thought I would share. There she is on Jane. Obviously, this has not been blocked yet, but I'm happy. It's a little bit oversized, which isn't my usual thing, but you know, I'm working on it. And I wanted to talk a minute about the bind off. So, because I bound off in pattern. And you may have seen that instruction in a pattern before and not really known what was going on. But what I did is I knit the knit stitches and purled the purl stitches in the bind off round, and then did the bind off movement with whichever stitches they were. And the thing is that continues the direction. If you ever look at bound off stitches, you'll see that they lean to one side or the other. And I can't remember now which. I think knit stitches tend to fold to the front and purl stitches tend to fold to the back of the work. If we're looking at the quote unquote right side of the work with stockinette fabric. So the thing with doing that on the bind off is it makes the bind off just fit in nicely with the fabric. So that is why it is recommended to bind off in pattern. I also have found, I have a shawl design where you bind off the top edge, and you work from the bottom up. And it's in garter stitch, and what I did is, do I have this right? Yes. I have you do a knit one, purl one bind off, and it makes a nice smooth edge because it's very regular, back and forth and back and forth. And what it does with the knits and the purls, it sort of makes the bind off stand up. So you don't have it just going over onto one side or the other. So that it really is, it does make a difference. That directionality of the stitches makes a difference on your edge. And I was a little worried, to be honest, because binding off sometimes, at least when I first started knitting, sorry, Jane's being very squeaky, the bind off could be kind of tight. So luckily I've had a lot of practice knitting and binding things off. And so as you can see, there's plenty. Oh, Jane's rolling. It's a problem with a lady on wheels, but there's plenty of stretch here. So I'm not worried about the bottom being too tight or anything. And this will block out really nice and smooth. But that's one thing that I was worried about with doing a top-down sweater as opposed to a bottom-up. But so, you know, you may want to, if you knit a sweater like this, you may want to work on binding off loosely, like making those stitches sort of as loose as you can, or even consider going up a needle size. If you cannot bind off loosely, if like you're a tight knitter, consider going up a needle size or two to help. You'll make bigger stitches. They will only be fractionally bigger, but it could be enough to help that out. So the things left to do here are the collar, and it's going to be a rolled neck, so it'll be pretty basic. But I will pick up from my provisional cast on and knit around and around. And as I said, I'm going to, I calculated for 10 rounds, but I will knit for 7 or 8 and then do the bind off. And the calculation of 10 rounds allows extra yarn for binding off. And again, I'll want to bind off loosely so that my collar isn't too tight. I can get it over my head. But I did choose a size that is bigger than the size of my head in terms of inches for that. And then the other thing I'm going to have to do is the sleeves. So I will be picking up, see if you can see that. And I've got my provisionally cast on from the split area, and then my held stitches from the sleeve. And so those will make a nice round and round, and I'll have to double check my decrease rate so that I get the cuffs the right size. And then I'm going to do a 2x2 rib for the cuff, and I have to decide if I want it to match the 3 inches that I ended up doing of ribbing on the body of the sweater, or if I want the ribbing to start here at the same place, so that when your arms are down, when your arms are down here, that that the ribbing begins in the same place. It's hard for me to point that out exactly to you while I'm holding the phone in one hand. But so those are really my 2 options. And since I'm going to have long sleeves, that could mean more ribbing. So that might be the argument against, because I'm not a fan of doing the 2x2 ribbing. I'm a thrower. I knit right-handed. So knits and purls going back and forth is a little more tedious for me. I think for some continental knitters who flick with their left, that may be a little easier to work back and forth. But I could be wrong on that. Anyway, I'm fast as anything on a round and around stockinette or back and forth garter stitch, but ribbing slows me down a bit. But I have some time to figure that out. I also have to decide whether I want to do this this beautiful stitch pattern again, maybe, on the down near the wrist, like just above the ribbing, I think would be where I would do it. I think it would look, I thought maybe, I could do it on the upper arm. That might be kind of cool, but I think it'll just look like a mistake because it'll be too close to this, the yoke part here. There's been too much knitting already here, more than there was space between the other motifs. So I think that would just look awkward. So my plan is either to do the sort of floral, viney, whatever we're going to call it. I got to figure that out too. Do that right above the ribbing. And then I'll have to do an extra bit of calculation about the number of stitches I need there, and then the number of stitches for the ribbing. Or I decide not to add that extra bit of color work. So I may try blocking the sweater as is now, just to see how the color work lays in comparison to the stockinette, because that would be a factor. If this fabric is tighter than the stockinette, then I don't know that I really want to fuss with adding that above the cuff. So that's the story here. And I'm sorry I didn't get to talk to you yesterday, but I'll be back with more tomorrow. So tonight I'll have to decide if I want to block it overnight. It is not terribly humid right now, so it would probably be dry by morning or by sometime tomorrow during the day. So that's the story from here. Thanks for stopping by. I'll be back tomorrow. Bye.